get you introduced to specific parts of the Flatcar development, today's spotlight is on Cluster API. And after that, we'll open up the call for your questions and our answers. First of all, let's meet the team. Hi, I'm Tilo. My team drives Flatcar development, and this is my team.
Hi, I'm Sayan, and I am primarily overlooking the whole Flatcar release process.
Hi, I'm Marga. I've been mostly working on vendor integration.
Hi, I'm Dongsu. I'm working on Cluster API integration with Flatcar, also security updates of Flatcar releases.
Hi everyone, I'm Mathieu. I'm mainly focused on testing the OS.
You're muted, Andy.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Andy Randall. I have been in a business development role at Kinvolk, and as Kinvolk moves into Microsoft, I'll be moving into a PM role there.
Hi, I'm a developer, mostly here and there, but yeah, dealing with kind of some bug debugging work and build system work mainly.
And I see we have Iago on the call as well, so I think we didn't know you were going to be here, Iago, when we put the names on the slides. So you should introduce yourself though, because you do have a long heritage with Flatcar.
Yeah, so I'm Iago. I'm one of the co-founders at Kinvolk, and I was one of the people that kicked off the Flatcar work. I think I started, and then Dongsu joined briefly after. So I was tasked with reproducing all the build system from the original CoreOS Container Linux and creating the first releases. So yeah, I'm not doing much on the Flatcar side now, but yeah, it's all very exciting to see the team growing around it.
Thanks, folks, for introducing. So let's first address the elephant in the room. Over to Andy.
Yeah, I'm not always called the elephant in the room, but thank you for that. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are tuning in because you're wondering about the future of Flatcar following Kinvolk being acquired by Microsoft. Just first of all, in terms of kind of the history, we're aware, obviously, the history of Flatcar goes back to the CoreOS days, 2013. So it's got quite a long heritage, and Flatcar came out of an acquisition itself of the original CoreOS team by Red Hat. So, we can absolutely understand kind of apprehension that folks might have. And it's something that we discussed a lot with Microsoft throughout the process as well. And, it's something where we said, even right from the very beginning, we want to understand the commitment that Microsoft has to the Flatcar user community, and we need to make sure that you're communicating that clearly as well to everyone. So, if you've seen the announcements, you'll see the comments here. So, Brendan Burns, who is in a very senior role in Microsoft and who our engineering team reports up into, his comment in the in the launch announcement, I think says all of that, right? The CoreOS community has been on a winding journey, and Microsoft is committed to collaborating with the community and continuing the evolution of Flatcar Container Linux. So it's pretty clear, statement there. And then same statement from Chris, the Kinvolk CEO and one of the co-founders. It's not a replay of that movie that you saw before, right? So if you were one of the people that came to Flatcar through CoreOS, it's a very different situation if you think about it. I mean, the reason why we wanted to start Flatcar was we looked at CoreOS and realized, Red Hat is an operating system company. They have a way of building OSs. They're not going to want to, add another Linux distro into that. Sorry, someone says they lost audio from me. Is that everyone?
No, it's okay.
Fine.
Okay. And okay, great, thanks. Yeah, and in the Microsoft's case, it's just very different. They absolutely want Flatcar to continue as a community project, and don't have the same kind of issues with this. I mean, Kinvolk coming into Microsoft is primarily about the work we're doing with upstream open source communities. So we have some time for Q&A later on, and happy to kind of take questions then. But we've got a lot of content that we want to get through, so I suggest that we kind of push on at this point and get into the core of talking about the community and the technology.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. The exciting part here is that we're having a very strong community focus now. This is only the first building block of a lot. We want to involve you folks. We want to see you participating in the project. So we'll have this meeting as a monthly cadence where we just reach out and discuss with you. We of course open to all kind of contributors, even like partners that wanna offer some kind of support for that. And he's a good person to talk to you and to talk to about. And we want to make sure to get out of the single vendor thing and become a truly community-driven project at the end of the day. So we're looking for folks to take up roles and to develop the project together with us. And talking about one of the opportunities to pick up things, let's hand over to Marga for the interoperability section.
Thanks. So as I mentioned in the beginning, for the past year, I've been working on better integrating Flatcar into different vendors. Flatcar inherited the interoperability from CoreOS, but we also expanded that and kept it running. And we've created a matrix where we show the different platforms and different architectures that we support and the status that they have. So if this is available on GitHub, if you go to this matrix, you can see all the different platforms that we currently support and the status that they have. It has different columns. So the first column says full feature release blocker. So this means that we support all the features that we want to support there and that we test them. And if something breaks, it's a release blocker. So we don't release until we fix the breakage. And then we have a column that says works, which means, well, Flatcar runs on that platform. And we have a lot more platforms that we know that Flatcar runs on than platforms that are tested, which is the next column. So tested means that we have continuous integration. We use Jenkins for continuous integration, and we have tests that verify that the platform works. And so, for example, in the screen that Thilo is showing now, Hetzner Cloud comes up as a platform that we know Flatcar works. We actually even used it until very recently, but we don't have it integrated in our CI. And the next column says who owns the platform. So basically right now, most of the columns say either Flatcar maintainers are the owner or no owner. But we are hoping that trying to inspire the community to participate more in Flatcar could lead to having other owners in the owner column. And so, for example, if you are using Hetzner Cloud and you're interested in Flatcar having full support there, you could become an owner. The notes column includes some things that are not fully supported, like on EC2 and on Azure, Flatcar actually works and we test it, but there are some things that are not fully integrated yet. So the first one has a tracking issue. The second one, this says needs tracking issue because we don't have a tracking issue yet, but it's work that needs to happen to improve the integration. And so, yeah, scrolling down, we have more platforms. The first ones are the public cloud, then we have private cloud, and then we have Kubernetes, different types of Kubernetes engines, and then we have cluster API. As Thilo mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we will have a spotlight section about cluster API. This is something that we've been spending a lot of time on. And then finally, we have Kubernetes distros. And there we have a different owner, which is Locomotive, because Locomotive is a distro, a Kubernetes distro, also developed by Kinvolk. And so integration with Locomotive has been fully tested for a while, and it's maintained by the Locomotive maintainers. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Marga. That's pretty amazing. All right. One thing that we've been doing a lot iterations on is finding a good rhythm of for releases, release cadences, the amount of changes that we integrate. And that's a very important part that basically involves all of the team. So it's got its own section in this presentation, handing off to Andy to give an intro, and then to Sayan to talk about upcoming releases.
Yeah, thanks, Thilo. So I think one of the things that's important when you think about roadmap and you think about, you know, should we do this thing or that thing, is to have a, you know, a guiding vision as to what you're trying to do. Because particularly with an operating system, it's easy to try and, you know, to get pulled in a lot of different directions and to be all things to all people. So, you know, there's a few cornerstones that we want to hold on to. You know, one is that container Linux is about running containers. You know, may seem obvious, but there are certainly people that would like to do other things. But it's also running containers not necessarily with Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a, you know, probably one of our most, it is our most important use case and target, but it's not the only way that people use Flatcar. So running containers with a minimal footprint. So that's probably, you know, the most important vision type of thing. The next, which you know, was always a founding kind of philosophy of CoreOS, and we take this forward and take very, very seriously, is security, and enabling it to be easy for people to deploy secure systems. So, you know, having it as much out of the box secured as possible, keeping it up to date, so making easy updates. All of that is ultimately around trying to keep this layer of deployment as secure as possible. And then the last piece is around how do you manage large numbers of nodes? And even, you know, one of the things that I've realized talking with users is when we think about at scale, you know, you tend to think of, you know, thousands or tens or hundreds of thousands of servers. But even when you start to get into a few dozen servers, like manageability matters, and the kind of automation of provisioning with declarative provisioning, a fleet-centric view of updates, and you know, how you manage that fleet becomes really important. You know, even at that relatively modest scale. So while this is obviously something that people with larger deployments care most about, this is something that we feel is important to pretty much all users at any kind of scale. So if you're using Flatcar already, you'll have gathered some kind of update frequency just from what you see. I don't know how much we've actually really shared this publicly in terms of how we think about release cadence, but you know, part of what we're doing here with these calls is, you know, really that everything that we do is shared publicly now. Yeah, and kind of how we think about it is really there's kind of like a TikTok on each of these releases where we get a release, a new set of functionality, a new package update or something like that comes out in a major alpha release. That has a couple of weeks to cure. We get maybe a patch release out, and then and then kind of every 4 weeks or so there would be a major alpha update, and then every other one of those will feed into a beta, and typically that will be the patch release on the alpha, because it has given us time to to resolve any teething issues. Betas, just kind of mathematically following from that, are going to be every 4 weeks or so with a major and a minor patch, every 8 weeks or so between majors, and then stable version, that means you're going to get a major release every couple of months, and then a minor patch release every month. So that's kind of the cadence that we're looking for. And then we also introduced more recently an LTS release, and that's an annual release. So we have one of those out. There'll be another one later this year.
So next, talking about the releases, we have already done a release recently, which was on April 20th, and we did a release for all the branches. Alpha and beta got a major release, and stable and LTS got a minor release. So as Andy told, that most of the package updates goes through the alpha. We did a couple of major ones, which was like curl, GNU TLS, get, SQLite, and like Go 1.6, which was included in alpha. And over the next few weeks, that would be going to beta and like stabilizing through beta and stable. All of the channels got their own Linux kernel systemd updates, and along with a couple of bug fixes. And one of the major thing was the deprecation of Rocket and Kubelet wrapper. We did send out a announcement to our mailing list. So if you want to know more, you can probably refer to that announcement message. We also have our releases space. So that's another point of a point where you can refer to see through which all CVs got fixed, and which all bugs were actually fixed, and which all package according to the versions were fixed. And so this is the current state of release, and we are planning the next release, which is on May 19th. So we are planning next release of May 19th. It will be primarily be a light release. We are pretty much stabilizing beta and stable and LTS, and alpha will again receive a major release. In this release, we are targeting updates to dbus and NVIDIA drivers, binutils, and Rust in SDK. Yeah, so this is pretty much how it looks like. So and probably if you go to the slides later, you can probably like match how Andy mentioned about the release upgrades with the version numbers. So this is how the release will be looking forward. And I guess next Dongsu will be taking over and explaining cluster API.
Thanks, Andrew and Sayan. Yeah, and it's Spotlight time. So in the Spotlight section, we introduce specific areas of work in the Flatcar project, and today it is cluster API. Dongsu?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the cluster API in Flatcar. So what is cluster API? The cluster API is a sub-project of Kubernetes. It's a relatively young project, and it is focused on simplifying provisioning and upgrading and operating multiple Kubernetes clusters. So our goal is to make cluster API support also Flatcar. So not only major distros like Ubuntu and CentOS, but also like our Flatcar container nodes. And what this diagram is just a simple example of how cluster API works. So there is typically one management cluster and multiple workload clusters. And one management cluster, simply a cluster in front of a user. So it can be any remote cluster or local kind cluster, anything. And if we generate a manifest locally and apply that manifest to the management cluster, then yeah, the remote workload clusters would be created. And how the provisioning actually works, and that's performed by individual infrastructure provider. For example, AWS has its own cluster API provider, AWS, and Azure also has cluster API provider, Azure. Yeah, each provider is a separate implementation. And yeah, OS config should be also abstracted in a general way, so users should just forget about the detail of OS config. That's the goal of the cluster API. And the reality is still there is no single standard for OS config definition. So we need to still think about details. So how these OS config should be configured. For example, how where the image is located, and so on. Next. So one of the major challenge of cluster API is that we need to make the base image for cluster API, and to be able to create an image for cluster API, we must run image builder. That's just another Kubernetes sub-project. You can download and run on your local laptop. Then you can see that this image builder is just a wrapper on top of Packer and Ansible. And so if you give some input defined in JSON format, then you can see that any kind of output images are generated. QEMU and QCOW2 image or AMI used by AWS or OVA and so on. So what we have done is mainly to support Flatcar in the image builder. Not only major distros like Ubuntu or CentOS. Yeah, that was the first step we did for cluster API support. Next. Next slide. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the current status of this integration between cluster API and Flatcar, and about the future plans. And first of all, there are three different major GitHub repos. So one is image builder, and the second is cluster API itself. This is a main repo, and it includes the Bootstrap provider. The last one is cluster API infrastructure provider that varies depending on which cloud provider you want to use. So far, we support only AWS provider. That was the first option of our proof of concept. So we have created each pull request for each repo. So image builder part is quite well done. AWS is also supported, QEMU is also supported, and the PRs are already merged by upstream. And in the near future, we are going to support other cloud providers, Azure or vSphere and so on. Can you go back to the previous one?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So so far the cloud init is supported by default, but we need to support Ignition for both bootstrap provider and infrastructure provider. That was one of the huge challenges of our own, and Mateusz at Kinvolk and me worked together to get this PRs created and updated. So if you are interested in these PRs and functionalities, then yeah, please go to the PRs. Next. Yeah, also we need to do the add more features for infrastructure providers, not only the AWS and the major ones, also the other ones, for example, Metal3 and vSphere, Azure Tinkerbell, Equinix Metal. So for now, AWS is working well, and there are initial proof of concept for Azure and Tinkerbell. So in the near future, we are going to create PRs to the upstream repos. And yeah, there are still some work to do for other providers. Yes, that's it.
And that's where you come in. That's just one of the many fields of work where you can participate and help the project along, which brings me to the call for action. Of course, Flatcar, the OS3 as a single vendor open source project, mainly as users, we're now looking for developers for a larger community. Please spread the word. If you have an itch to scratch and you feel Flatcar is what scratches it best, just participate. We're on GitHub, and we have a pretty active community. We are moving most of our team communications out into the open as well, so there won't be any intransparency. We're adopting metrics and have established an IRC bridge, and it goes as far as into our internal Slack. So we are basically aware of all of the communications, and we'll have most of the team communications right out in the open. If you're in for more elaborate and relaxed discussion, then please have a look at the email list as well. And of course, join us for upcoming community calls. We want to have your feedback and your input for that. And share your feedback with us on any way that you prefer and see most fit. How can we support you better? How can we grow the community? What is your particular interest in Flatcar? And what do you want to bring to the project? Which brings me to the closing slide. And I'm now handing over to the community. So I'm gonna stop the presentation and then see who else is on the call.
Yeah, and also I think just open it up if anyone wants to say hi and introduce themselves, and what their interest is in being on the call and what they're doing with Flatcar. Happy to hear from folks as well.
We cannot hear you, Aryan.
Yeah, I see Aryan is.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Aryan. I see some familiar faces from All Systems Go, so that's nice. I was wondering what the relationship between the cluster API provider and Locomotive Kubernetes is. Whether those two projects are working together, or are they part of each other, or are they separate projects?
Iago, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so currently there's no relation, but we have in our Locomotive plans to get more integrated with Cluster API. Perhaps not the full stack, like with the management cluster and the workload clusters, but maybe some of the parts to maybe get a better story with the provisioning with the community. Yeah, but for now there's no relationship.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yannick. I think Andrew should probably know me from all the annoying emails. So I noticed a
Not
distinct
annoying.
lack of bare metal deployment, at least by name, on the interoperability matrix. Is that intentional because you just assume it generally works as long as the hardware is supported in the kernel, or is there some other potential to add something to this, since we are primarily eyeballing running it on bare metal long term?
As long as you can PXE boot, you should be fine.
So yeah, I mean, well, I think there's an interesting question there, right? About like you're essentially asking about an HCL, right? A hardware, would we maintain a hardware compatibility list for?
Not quite that. I mean, I think if we are willing to run bare metal, we should be willing to also make sure that we test the hardware we're going to deploy. But I was just wondering if there's any like particular kinks of bare metal deployments that you are considering or looking to consider, or if that's something that you think if someone were to take a hat on for that would be interesting or not. By the fact that you're here, that I'm here, you probably noticed that we decided to not be deterred by the Microsoft acquisition and see where the community is going, and if we can help making it as amazing as I hope it will be.
Yeah. So I like Thilo said, I would venture to say we assume that it will work on most hardware. I know that some folks have even gotten things working on Raspberry. It's like if it's something that's of interest. If there is particular line items like explicitly doesn't work because of XYZ or something, but I would assume that would just be like an open issue on a tracker to figure out, or if maybe more clearly, if there was like a line item of like, yes, here's some particular documentation on the intricacies of that system, then maybe it could be a line item. That's fine. If it's something you want to take on or at least expose yourself to, then I'll welcome you to it.
But maybe more about the non-hardware question. We have this general PXE boot and ignition config URL pointing always tested in the CI currently by Equinix Metal workloads and also in Locomotive in the bare metal CI.
And I also wanted to add, there's one thing that is not in the matrix right now, which is about the hardware. And so, for example, we know that Flatcar works on Raspberry Pi, although it takes a little bit of tweaking to make it work. But like if you do the tweaking, it works. But we don't have it in our matrix saying like, what is the status of Raspberry Pi right now? We could have like a completely separate one that talks about hardware support. Yeah, but we don't have it right now.
And maybe that is something we could open up to community for people to say, hey, yeah, I'm running these Dell servers, and I'll take the job of checking each release, because I'm going to be doing that anyway for the servers I'm running, and we just have a page where people can maintain a list of the hardware that they're running on it. It's maybe not definitive, but it provides a way for the community to share what they're doing and what they have tested on.
I think that would be particularly interesting for something like the Pis that you mentioned, because if there's tweaks needed, we can share them more easily and exchange whatever we needed to do to make it run, and see maybe this goes upstream, or if no one wants it, then we keep it separate. But would be good to have an exchange way for that somehow.
Let's look at that, Thilo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if it's an additional driver or just a tweak of kernel settings, we absolutely want that, because it just basically increases the breadth of things we support. And I mean, if you are looking for something more formal, like the hardware compatibility list and having your name there, yeah, that would be.
I think we're thinking about something a little bit between those, right? Kind of just maybe not like a formal hardware compatibility list in the sense of when a release goes out, it must be tested against those things, but more something the community can update to share which hardware they are running on. And I should just say, kind of from a strategy perspective, I mean, even though we've now Kinvolk is now part of a cloud provider, right? I mean, it's from the project's perspective, and even from Microsoft's perspective, running on bare metal is probably the most important target for Flatcar.
Definitely good input. Yeah. All right, folks.
Question. So kind of going along with hardware support, can you comment more about ARM64? I know this is alpha support. Can you talk about getting to beta or stable?
In general, it's heavily work in progress. In fact, we have staffed this endeavor quite recently, and we're pushing forward. There's a number of hurdles to take here, just from a legacy perspective. So we've just left ARM support the way it was for some time, and there's a number of system and package upgrades that we would need to face for that, which we are currently working through. So it's actively being worked on. I don't know, Kai, you have a little background there. Maybe you want to share some details.
Yeah, so currently there are some system components that are failing, and otherwise, one big thing is actually hardware enablement. So to get this kernel config that we have for ARM, work on as many devices as possible. So I think these two things, and maybe just some like fixing some failing tests or making sure that all the tests work. So these things are, I think, important.
Thank you.
And I mean, there's even with ARM support today, there's there's a number of levels that we see in terms of usability. For most like server-based cloud offerings, you can use ARM right away. It won't support the entirety of Flatcar features, and that's what we're currently working through. But it'll carry your workload, and it'll be it'll have like the best performance that you can get with Flatcar, of course. It's not that there's any deal breaker in it, but then there's legacy items like SE Linux and basically that kind of area that we still need to bring up to speed. And this is more like technical work that we're currently doing. All right, so we had Yannick and Zishen. I see a number of other folks on the call. Maybe you just want to say hello and introduce yourself, even if you don't have any questions, and tell us what you're using Flatcar for.
Hi there, everyone. I am Aniruddha Bashak. I am from India, and I am a college student, second year student, and I am learning these things new. And I thought that this community would be a great place, so that I came here exploring Kinvolk and all these Flatcar Linux things. Thank you, everyone. It was a great, and I'm learning these things new, and I'll be exploring more on this platform. Thank you, everyone.
Great, we're happy to have you in the community.
Thank you.
That's great.
All right, so if there aren't any more questions, at least for now, let's wrap up the call. Please reach out to us and interact with us. We're gonna make at least the metrics chat a lot more lively in the coming days and weeks. And we hope for all of your input and your participation. Thanks for joining.
I have one more question. So do you have some plans for the next community meetings, some agenda, or how it will look like?
It'll be a little bit like this one with different spotlight. And so we're trying to establish a rhythm. And it'll be in roughly a month. So this is a monthly cadence.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question. All right, folks, hope to see you soon on metrics, on IRC, or on the mailing list, or directly in the project. Bye,
Thank you
folks.
all.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.